cooperation with Israel. Okay, we start this hour in Europe, and Germany's Foreign Minister Johann Wadephul is urging China to use its influence to help end Russia's war in Ukraine. Wadephul made these comments during his first official visit to Beijing, where he emphasized that China, as a major Russian trading partner, has significant sway over Moscow. He called on Beijing to take concrete steps to promote peace and de-escalation, despite China maintaining a neutral stance and refraining from condemning Russia's invasion. Wadephul's visit marks a key diplomatic effort by Germany to involve China in negotiations, highlighting Europe's push for a broader international support to bring an end to the ongoing conflict in Ukraine. Joining us now is Andrew Latham. He is an international affairs expert and he joins us live from Minneapolis in the United States. Andrew, thank you very much for joining us here on the programme. Of course, Andrew, 2025 has been a year of conflict. Russia and Ukraine, of course, dragging into its fourth year, approaching its fourth year. But of course, the world's second largest economy and powerhouse China hasn't been involved in brokering these peace deals, of course, like Donald Trump's United States. Of course, now Germany pushing for China to be involved in those negotiations. What more can you tell us about China's strategy when it comes to making peace in these conflicts?
Well, China, above all, is looking to position itself on the global stage as a leader of the global south, first of all. B, a budding or emerging leader of the international order more broadly. And so those are the big pictures, and that inclines them to want to play the role of, when they can, peacemaker, a broker of various kinds of deals. But there are some cross currents as well at play here. Beijing is not going to throw Moscow, one of its major partners, under the bus. It simply isn't. And so it has maintained a position of, I wouldn't say strict neutrality. Behind the curtains, of course, it's been transferring a lot of dual-use technology to Russia, but it certainly hasn't condemned the Russian invasion of Ukraine. Again, that Russian invasion of Ukraine is perceived very differently in the global south. It is not viewed as an epochal, world-changing event. It's just another European war as far as many countries in the global south are concerned. And so China has not invested too much of its diplomatic or geopolitical capital in appearing to try to bring that war to an end. So striking a balance between advancing its agenda as emerging leader of the global south in the international community, but also not wanting to abandon its ally, Russia.
Yes, Andrew, China insists that it is neutral in this war, but of course refuses to condemn Russia's invasion. But how neutral is Beijing in practice?
On the diplomatic stage, it is rather neutral. It's striking a tone. Neutral means we're not in favor of one side or the other, and they've struck that tone. In practice, though, they have clearly been playing the role of supportive ally. They haven't supplied much in the way of kinetic or lethal aid, but a lot of dual-use technology is being provided. And of course, China is a major market for Russian oil and gas, but also other commodities like potash, fertilizer, for example, which is sustaining the Russian war effort. So it's providing every kind of assistance imaginable other than providing lethal military aid and coming out squarely in favor of Russia's attack on Ukraine in international circles, on the international diplomatic stage. So again, trying to strike that balance, but in practical terms, I don't think Russia could continue to prosecute this war without China's under the table, as it were, support.
Okay, Andrew, do stay with us as we turn to our next story. The European Union nations have agreed on a major tightening of migration rules, backing proposals that would allow return hubs for rejected asylum seekers to be set up outside the 27-country bloc. Interior ministers approved the plan during talks in Brussels, responding to growing public pressure across Europe to curb irregular migration. The measures proposed by the European Commission aim to speed up returns and improve enforcement of asylum decisions. However, they still require approval from the European Parliament before becoming law. Migration remains a defining issue for Europe. By 2020, the continent hosted around 87 million international migrants, including around 40 million from outside Europe and millions moving within EU states. In 2023 alone, more than 4.3 million non-EU immigrants entered the bloc. Migration flows are driven by economic opportunity, conflict, climate pressures, and long-standing historical ties. Colonial history still shapes migration to Europe. Many migrants come from Africa and Asia, where European rule imposed borders, extracted resources, and reshaped politics, creating inequalities and conflict. Shared language, education, and family ties also draw migrants to the continent. Andrew, EU interior ministers have agreed to allow these what they call return hubs for rejected asylum seekers outside the 27-country bloc. How significant is this shift in EU migration policy?
Well, it signals a response to what many European citizens consider to be a growing problem, which is the movement of peoples of non-European heritage into the European Union. So on the one hand, we have that dynamic at play. On the other hand, it's a response to, and this is related to, internal pressures generated by what is often referred to as the far right or the right wing in European politics. So it's both a rational response in a sense to an objective challenge, but it's also a political response to a political challenge. And sorry, neighbor's dog. It is legally, it's important that these hubs be established outside European Union territory because that strips the migrants of claims to certain kinds of political status within Europe.
Yes, and Andrew, setting up these return hubs outside the European Union raises immediate red flags. Does this violate the European Union's human rights obligations, or can the bloc justify it, or will have to jump through numerous loopholes?
I think the latter. It's going to have to jump through numerous legal loopholes. One of the reasons why these hubs would be set up outside of the European Union is because it's in a legal gray zone, as it were, or at least it's in a zone in which advocates for restricting migration can claim that these are perfectly legal under international and law and norms, etc. But there'll be pushback as well. There'll be those who claim that this is a violation of international humanitarian law and the rights of people to move and etc. So it has to be seen as a move on a chessboard, as it were. And on one side, there are those in favor of current rates of migration into Europe from outside Europe. And on the other hand, there are those administrative, political, social forces that are pushing back and saying, no, enough is enough, and we need to find a way to curtail these migration dynamics. And this, I think this is one move. It's not definitive one way or the other, whether it's defeated or it goes ahead, but it is a move on that particular chessboard.
Yes, Andrew Latham, thank you very much for joining us. As always, it is a pleasure to talk to you here on the programme. Okay, we move on now, and the United Nations has sharply criticised what